Welcome in, Loons fans, to the second edition of the Matchday preview. Jonathan Harrison here, joined once again by Manny Lagos. Manny, how we doing? We got plenty to talk about this week. We got a new head coach. We got the season opener. We got the home opener coming up. There's so much to discuss, but first, how are you this week?
I'm doing well. I mean, I think it's opening week. We had this event on Tuesday where the sun was out. We had fans and some of our new players experience Allianz Field for the first time prior to our big opening at 1 p.m. on Saturday against Columbus. And I don't know, that kind of set a tone for me, just getting really excited about the week and reminding myself, we have all this stuff going on, but it's really cool that it only happens once a year. We're having a home opener.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, we had the open practice on Tuesday. We were all there. It was a fun experience. Great crowd that showed up on what seemed like it was going to be a nice day, but then turned very cold very quickly somehow. And then obviously we got the snow and the winter weather after that, but temps warming up again, looking like a perfect day at Allianz Field on Saturday. Absolutely cannot wait for that one. So let's jump into the big news this week, Manny. New head coach, Eric Ramsay. Club announced it Monday. Looking forward to him joining the club. Obviously, got to get the paperwork situated, his time in Manchester United situated. What are your initial thoughts on Eric Ramsay, and then what can he bring and what he will bring to this club?
I mean, obviously, you're really excited when the club has an announcement like this, and you kind of have, made sure that you've gotten to a place where you're excited to let the public know that there's a direction moving forward with the head coach. And certainly, it hasn't been easy to talk about the timeline of Kala getting here and then Kala getting here to create the process for hiring the head coach, and just making sure that we felt like those things were organized and structured in a way that we were comfortable. And so to finally be able to announce to the public the new direction with the new leader on the sideline is incredibly exciting and incredibly obviously important for the club. But certainly for Eric, it's exciting to have somebody who's got a pedigree already at his young age, and really exciting for us to have him come over here and be part of MLS and be part of Minnesota United.
As a former head coach yourself, any words of advice before he takes over?
Well, I like you said, I think he certainly is at a pretty amazing environment right now, and I think he's learning every day, and I think he's probably absorbing everything he can as he grows, leaves that role into this role. And I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is, is making sure as a club we're ready for him, we're supportive of him, and we're ready to work together. And the club is to build something special with them. And again, it's exciting. Like I said, I'm excited for him. I'm excited for the club.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump into the other exciting news and the good vibes around the club recently because of the 2-1 win on Saturday in Austin. The club looked very dominant on the field. We've seen pretty much that squad on the field in some shape or form. I think we've rarely seen it in a 4-3-3 like we saw on Saturday. There's so much to discuss, so much meat on this bone from this game that this will probably take up a large portion of the podcast as well today. So let's jump into this match. For me, one of the things that went right was clearly this high press. It clearly took Austin off guard a little bit, and they struggled to cope with it. And the amount of bodies pushed forward, I think that was the biggest notable thing for me on watching the game back is when the club had the ball in the attacking third, it felt like 8 or 9 guys up near the attacking third, up near Austin's box, kind of cycling the ball around, getting chance after chance.
Yeah, it was an awesome start to the season. Yeah. I mean, on the road in Austin, sold out stadium. I think we talked on the podcast about having to be mentally sharp. And I think that starts with the credit to the staff and the players themselves based on the work they did in preseason, that they were that tuned in individually and collectively to just right from the get-go, be sharp and ready to go and deal with any adversity. And I think the exciting thing about the half was that it just turned into this great dominant half where Austin couldn't find solutions to get out. They kept on trying to find solutions, and it just made us even more emboldened to get more numbers in the attacking third and find more chances. And it really was a fun kind of sequence of just seeing it live. whether you're watching on TV or for myself at the stadium, to just see Austin continue to struggle more and more because we just got sharper and sharper. And, again, the goals don't always come when you want them to, but certainly the goal came at an appropriate time in the game when we really should have had 2 or 3 before that. And it kind of just showed our dominance in that first half.
Yeah, absolutely. That Robin Lod goal kind of summarized what that first half had been to that point, in that Minnesota were getting their chances. Occasionally, Austin would break out and get the ball upfield, but whenever they got the ball, it was get the ball up quickly and try and break this high line, and Minnesota's defense stood tall. And that goal started off with Josef Rosales getting the ball back and basically running up the field with it for 30, 40 yards, then getting the ball eventually to Teemu Pukki over to Sung Bin Young on a deflective shot. But that Robin Lod's goal came off of Sung Bin Young's shot or cross, however you want to look at it. And it was a great sequence of play because it just showed how many bodies Minnesota were pushing forward and kept in that box and kept the pressure on the Austin net. And even though Brad Stuver had an incredible night making a ton of saves, should have probably been more goals if not for Brad Stuver. I think every team says that when they face Austin, is that Brad Stuver just gets in the way a lot more than any other goalkeeper would. But it just felt like that goal by Robin Lod summarized how this team played on the night.
Yeah, it was a fun goal, and I think you're right to bring up Joseph's name to start that goal, just because I thought the whole half he and Fraggett really had a really sharp first half. They were creating chances, they were keeping the ball, they're moving it. Austin was really struggling to deal with their possession deep in their defensive third, and I thought Joseph's play was so sharp that it was really nuanced, but he hadn't been driving too much forward with the ball. He'd tend to drove and then maybe play up a frat or do 1-2 to try to get behind and cross it. And in this situation, he just had a couple subtle movements where he started to drive and fake like he was going to go back and maybe stop the tempo, but then he drove another 5 or 10 yards hard, and then he kind of faked like he was going to go back inside, maybe pass it square, drove another 10 yards, and at that point, everything opened up, and now you've got Robin running forward, you've got Pukki running forward, you got Sangbin running forward, you got the team really coordinated going forward. So the tempo of the goal was outstanding. It really was. And again, that came again from, I thought, 15 to 20 minutes of sustained pressure and confidence that we were going to get forward and get chances.
It almost felt like rewatching that goal and watching Josef start it, that he got the space, he got the ball back and got a little space and didn't expect Austin to give him as much space going forward as they were letting him have. Because as you mentioned, it felt like he stopped and looked like he was going to pass it back, but then realized there's still probably 5 or 10 more yards there to run into. So he did that and did that well and really kickstarted that play. I guess a lot of the question, or there will be some questions about what went wrong with Austin, or what went wrong for Austin on the night, because they still do have plenty of talent there. Sebastian Drusi really he wasn't available because of an injury, so they struggled in that part, struggled with creativity in that part. Was that wasn't their only problem on the night, though, not having Sebastian Drusi? What for you, after watching and rewatching it, was the biggest problem for them on the night?
I just think it's what we talked about at the beginning. I think they really struggle to solve the best way to play out of the back with our press and repress. And it really caught them being a little bit too stagnant at times and not moving the ball or moving their bodies to get into spaces to break some lines and get the ball forward, or frankly, to go more vertical more quickly. And again, at the end of the day, we have to remind ourselves this is one game, and this is what teams go through on both sides. Is they're still trying to figure out, how they're going to connect individually and collectively to kind of really build a unit both defensively and offensively. But particularly for me, they just struggled to try to figure out how to play out and essentially kind of move the ball up the field. And like I said, it's a lot easier said than done, particularly when you're in the moment. Everything's moving fast. The game is happening fast. There's no timeouts to re-coordinate it. So ultimately, like I said, they were a little frozen. And one of the nice things I liked about us is we really didn't play down to them freezing about it. We actually went on the front foot and we really kept going the entire 45 minutes. And we really didn't let up at all for those 45 minutes. So we walked into the locker room at halftime.
Yeah. In the second half, there was a noticeable change. Austin seemed to get a little bit of a foothold in the match, but after some substitutions were brought on, it seemed like Minnesota really took over again. I want to talk about that press because that's going to be one of the more notable things that is different about this team from years past is that press. And a lot of questions revolving that press are how long into the season can you keep this going on? Because we've seen teams in the past tend to struggle late in the season because it is a long season. There's a lot of travel. How do you, I guess, prepare for the length of the season, what the team is asking the players to do, and be able to press this high and intensely throughout the length of the season?
Well, I think a couple of things there. Obviously, you've got a great fitness department. They call them sports science departments now. And I think you really try to navigate your training loads, your micro cycles, which is your weekly training, your macro cycle, which is like, kind of every 46 weeks, you're monitoring, is the team getting fitter as the season goes on? So technically, there's the initial argument or comeback from what you said, I would say, is that like the team should be much fitter by the end of the year than they are right now, based on the fact that you're training a certain way, you're playing a certain way, every guy individually is getting fitter and hopefully collectively. So to me, the growth pattern of trying to build in whatever your fitness goal is within the game should be better collectively by the end of the year, as a goal as a group. And then individually, every player on your team should be hungry to individually better, in terms of beginning of the year to the end of the year. Now, in terms of the style, in terms of like you're worried about if you have the legs to go a full year, that's again, it's a management of the staff, a management of the individual player. But ultimately, what I love about the sport is it's 90 minutes of work, mentally, physically, emotionally, that you have to build into being good at. And really around the world, you're seeing now that the idea that you can't do something, particularly for the better teams world, is not really acceptable. It's really about, hey, this is what it takes to win, or this is what it takes to be really good at the sport. The players have to adapt. The staffs have to get better at making sure they push the players at the right time, the rest of the players at the right time. So to me, it's an exciting era of soccer in terms of the progressiveness of pushing people's athletes in a positive, healthy way. And the style, can be that. I mean, again, you're getting more of a kind of explosive movements and explosive moments in a game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at the rundown that we have, and there's so much to chew on in this game. And I want to get to the standout players because I know you, Kendra, and myself, we talked about this a little bit on Tuesday of which of the youngsters excited us the most. And I guess I'll start here. I'll let you go next. I was most impressed by Luik because it just seemed like he had this explosiveness and this confidence on the field. And you've seen him develop through the academy, through the twos, with Minneapolis City. You've seen him kind of come up through the system and get his chance. And he was a short-term loan call up from MNUFC too. I was super impressed with what I saw from him, just because of that confidence, the explosiveness he had on the ball. Obviously, there's still things to work on there with him, but he was the one who impressed me most. Obviously, Townie passing the ball off to Alejandro Bron was an incredibly smart play, unselfish play as well. You love to see that. Was in a nice area. Caden Clark had an amazing pass into Townie on that second goal in stoppage time to end the match. Songbin Yang, there's so many notable performances here from younger guys, but as well as from the rest of the team. Who stood out the most to you?
Great observations. I like it. I think this is one of those games where it's really fun to talk about the collective group because A, the back four was outstanding.
Yeah.
B, the central midfielders just dominated the midfield. I kind of had thought that, I think, in our last podcast, I felt like this was going to be a good game for our kind of experienced center midfielders. And they just, I thought, were, just completely dominant throughout the game. And then I thought Sang, Fraga, and Pookie were always dangerous, always active, and really, always made sure their back line were a threat. And then I would say, the tactical side of the subs, all four of them were great subs. The team, had a level up. So, for example, you mentioned Luik. He started right away from the get-go saying, I need to push the line back. I got to remind Austin, even though you're trying to get a goal, we're going to count it. And I think that was a big moment for him to come in and be that confident in terms of running with the ball and pushing their back line back and remind them they just can't send numbers forward to try to get a goal because we'll score on you. And then certainly I thought Braun came in and got the goal, and Tani set it up. So you got two guys that contribute, and then you got Caden who had a great assist. So it was just one of those days where it's hard for me to single anybody out. And funny enough, I didn't mention Dane, even though I think he had a solid game. But am I supposed to say he had a great game when he didn't have a lot to do? No, so in a weird way, he's probably the one by default that doesn't get a lot of mention in the game.
Yeah, I know on the broadcast, Dan and I like to get out of halves or full games when we don't have to mention Dane that much, because it means the defense and the midfield and the team as well just did a good job of keeping the ball away from him. And it felt very much like we rarely called his name up until that last minute, that last second goal by Austin, that consolation goal from them. It felt like there was it. Yeah, you mentioned the attack. That's going to be obviously a lot of the focus this week, is how well that attack performed, how different it looked with what they were doing, what they were asked to do. My question is, we mentioned last week that Bongi and Reynoso wouldn't be playing. It looks like that's going to be the case for Saturday as well. When those two guys do get in and when they are available to play, with what we saw on Saturday, how do those guys fit into this operation now? Because it feels like, as we mentioned last week as well, there's a lot of competition for attacking spots on this team. Obviously, you only have 11 guys on the field, but it just feels like with how they performed last week, that's a very exciting prospect going forward, a very tempting prospect for how well this team can play. And then you add in that, yeah, you didn't have maybe two of your most threatening attackers last year on the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously really important that we get healthy and we get depth, because you mentioned style and systems and identity, and there's no way a team can really be successful in this league unless they're using anywhere from 16 to 18 guys consistently that contribute. And then you could look at all 18 of them essentially are starters, and they're pushing each other, and then you're kind of flowing in and out of whatever groups that are playing well together at the time, or you're dealing with the other team, or you're changing your system a little bit to deal with the other team. So to me, we need them to get healthy as quickly as possible, because to have a healthy flow to compete in this league week in and week out, you really need a large group of your best players to always be healthy. So for us here right now, I think internally for the club, it's important the next couple of weeks those guys continue in that trajectory of getting fit, getting healthy, and being ready. Because, like I said, I kind of look at all those guys as starters, and I think that's where the group is going when you look at attacking phases. That we're going to need a lot of guys ready to come in at different moments or start to contribute.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the, just continuing to go over this match, the 2-1 win for Minnesota on Saturday. Some of these stats are a little shocking to see in the first week of the season. Minnesota outshot Austin 9-10, on goal 10-2 on target for Minnesota. 16 corners though. That's the standout number for me, and it is indicative of how they played, getting the ball upfield and keeping it in those dangerous areas, keeping in that attacking third, and not allowing Austin many chances to breathe on Saturday night. Those 16 corners, it felt like especially in that first half when they got 11 of them, I believe both of those numbers are club records for 1.5 or amount and a half an amount in a game. It just felt like Austin never had a chance to breathe, and that was fun to watch on Saturday, to see those corners pile up and to see how things were paying off, dividends were paying off from what was worked on in the preseason into the regular season so quickly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if we can give a positive to Austin, Stuver was outstanding. I mean, He really, he had a great year last year as well. I think his stats were top 5 goal in the league, and he was on it. He made some saves that really kept the scoreline flattering in that first half, and really, I think, absorbed a lot of pressure. So it was a really impressive performance by him. On the flip side, like you said, what I liked about it is all of our corners, except for maybe 2, were somewhat dangerous. And then there was a good handful that were very dangerous. And I think that's got to be a goal of our team, to continue to push our comfort zone in terms of how we approach set pieces, how we push ourselves to find dangerous moments in them, and create good chances, and frankly, create more goals, hopefully, throughout the year.
You don't have to wait for spring training to start playing the beautiful game this year. Minnesota United has a full slate of academy and youth camps scheduled throughout 2024. Show off your skills, take your game to the next level, and enjoy some quality time on the field with MNUFC's Licensed Academy staff. Visit the Camps and Combines page on MNUFC.com for more information. That's a little bit of our review from the 2-1 win for Minnesota, season opening win over Austin FC on the road. Now, man, they return home this Saturday to host the defending champion Columbus Crew, who got off to a 1-0 win against Atlanta this weekend, got the rings as well. There's so much to discuss with this team. They are about as dominant of a team as you can find already in this season. Yes, it was only a 1-0 win, but they were all over Atlanta, an Atlanta side that should compete this year in a very tough Eastern Conference. But Columbus, it felt like we're really in control of that match on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think it was as dominant as our Austin game. I think
Right.
Atlanta, particularly after Columbus missed the PK, I think Atlanta said, "Hey, let's go and try to see if we can steal a point." But from what I watched, it was pretty darn dominant. I don't think they, like us, I don't think they had a player that had a bad day on the field. They looked like a team that is defending MLS champs, and they really kind of put a show on for their home crowd. So very impressed with their opening day win at home.
It feels like with what we watched on Saturday from Columbus that they're, and I don't want to raise too much fears, but and this is going to be a heavy part of this conversation, is how these two teams match up. It feels like with the way they play and with how Minnesota want to play, that both sides are, it seems like very well set up to try and take advantage of how the other teams play, with Minnesota wanting to press high, Columbus a lot more comfortable playing out of the back, as we saw on Saturday. Their defenders are so confident on the ball. It's almost shocking how comfortable they are passing the ball around and then getting the ball forward. And when they do, it's very quickly into the attacking third and into dangerous areas and causing or giving Cucho plenty of chances at the attack.
Yeah, I think it's obviously you're coming into your home opener. You're playing against probably the best team on paper last year that ended up winning the championship too.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great kind of challenge for us early in the year to see where we are and see where we are at home in terms of trying to create a home mentality now of winning games and really, like I said, taking the emotion of the home opener, but making sure we are organized, we're structured. We have a way of going about and attacking Columbus and defending their great front three. So for me, it really starts with that front three, if I'm being honest. And it is Cucho and Diego Rossi. And then, last weekend it was Russell Rowe. That may happen again. We'll see. But that front three is been very, very dangerous and have been very lethal. And a lot of that has to do with probably, one of the best midfield combinations in the league with Nagbe and Morris. So you now deal with, a front five essentially that have been outstanding for a long time in the league. That is really hard to deal with. So first and foremost, whether it's a press, counter press, or when we have to get broken down and we have to defend deep, dealing with those guys can be massively important. I think that's the key to the game, is just absorbing their quality and not letting them get going. Because when they do, they can keep the ball, they can make you run, and then they can create chances through their creativity and their speed and Cucho's just kind of drive.
So with how Minnesota play with this high line that we saw in the first week, and with how dangerous that front three is, what's the best way for Minnesota to not give that front three from Columbus a whole lot of chances in dangerous areas, so we don't have to call Dane St. Clair's name too much?
Well, yeah, I think the first thing is you just said it. I think if I looked at Columbus last year, as well as they played, and they, like I said, I think on paper they played some of the best soccer, or if not the best soccer, but they didn't win the Supporters' Shield. I think they've been inconsistent with their back three in terms of not seeing games out. They've gotten quite a few leads last year, but they couldn't see games out, so they tied more games than they probably should have, and they probably dropped a decent amount of points, even though they played better than certain teams throughout the year. So I think a focus for me is making sure that we remind ourselves that back three can be inconsistent, they can get stretched. when they feel really good and get forward, that they can, the game can open up and we can get after them. So to me, it's really about that press being tight, being organized, and really concise, in that, like, it breaks down for them. We win the ball in good spots. If not, we're recovered in a way where it doesn't hurt us too bad if they break some lines. So it's a big one for me to think about the back three and making sure that we're patient. We make sure that we don't allow the game to go wide open where they can get a ton of chances. And then certainly while we're pressing and counter pressing, we do it in a way that really wins the ball in good spots.
How important is it in stifling what Columbus does to shut down their wingbacks, Yeboah and Farsi? They can absolutely just wreak havoc on opposing offenses and defenses, just closing things down and then getting the ball forward as quickly as they do. How important is it to shut those guys down?
It's really important, because if they're getting the ball at the tempo where they're dangerous, that means that Morris and Nagbe are really dictating the game and really kind of using the ball the way they want to. And so it's a big week for us to really kind of navigate Nagbe and Morris to make sure that they're not dictating the tempo of the game, but it's a good battle in there, and we're limiting their ability to go forward and limiting their forward passing. Again, hopefully through our own defensive tempo that really puts them under pressure and makes them play backwards.
You mentioned a little bit ago the midfield pairing of Aiden Morris and Darlington Nagbe. I don't think anybody would disagree that, as you said, one of the best midfield pairings in this league. Darlington Nagbe, an MLS legend in what he's been able to do in the midfield throughout his career at a couple different stops. What makes them so difficult to I guess corral and keep in control of throughout a match? And how do they go about what's the key, or how are they so important to what Columbus does?
Yeah, I think as a neutral, it's really a fun tandem to watch. And then I think as a
Yeah.
neutral and an American soccer fan, it's pretty cool that we have two Americans at different trajectories in their career combining to be so dominant within a team in MLS, which is obviously a global league with foreign players. So I would start with Darlington is, to me, one of the greatest American box-to-box midfielders in MLS history. I mean, or US soccer history. I mean, he really is somebody who is so incredibly skilled. He's so incredibly gifted at taking the ball in tough places and making sure he keeps it. And then also doing it in a way of a tempo that kind of deflates the other team. Because when they really want to get the ball, he just has a way to play out of it, or a way to dribble out of it, or get to a space where he can keep the ball moving. So his smoothness, I would say chill, is not actually chill. He's actually super intense, but the quality of his touches and his decision-making makes it seem like everything's slow and things are going in slow motion. And then you've got Morris, who's kind of a bulldog. He's somebody that's like, hey, I want to go and try to win balls or repress myself. And Darlington does a good job of reading that kind of energy and movement by Morris. And the next thing you know, the two of them are winning the ball higher up the field and now really dictating the tempo. So it's a really good tandem. Again, last year, the two of them have really played really, really well for large stretches of the season. And even the game where we went to Columbus and won, which was a great game, I thought the two of them were probably the hardest midfield tandem we had to handle last year.
Yeah, you mentioned that game, and that was going to be my next point. The history between these two clubs, there's been a lot of it throughout the years, especially in knockout tournaments. You have Minnesota beating Columbus Crew on penalties in the MLS's back tournament down in Orlando. And then you also had last year in the League's Cup, 3-3 draw, but the Loons win on shootout as well. Bongo Hukle Longwane scoring 2 goals. Hassani Dotson with the leveler. Right as the clock was expiring, it felt like. Christian Ramirez thought he had the winner in the 83rd minute. We'll talk about Christian Ramirez coming up in a little bit as well, because he was on Sound of Loons podcast yesterday with Kindra. Plenty to talk about there. But yeah, there's been some exciting matches between these two clubs in the past.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, no disrespect to Christian here. I think we were either going to open the show with me or close. So let's save Christian for last, because I think deserves a little bit more than just casually mentioning the last game. But yeah, certainly that was one of the better games, I think, in Leagues Cup last year. It was an awesome game, and it was just back and forth, and the goals came flying. So it was a really, really good game. I just thinking about how well we counterattacked and had some great goals was fun. So again, I think that's where this is an exciting game this weekend. I think it's the second game of the year. I think Columbus is still searching for what they're going to be this year too. I don't think that I can say, oh, they're great, so they're just going to play great. I think we've got a great opportunity this weekend to come out and take the energy of what we did last weekend and really come at them and really, really push the tempo, push them to be out of their comfort zone. And like last year, see where the game goes. And last year we came out with the win.
It certainly feels like with how both these two teams play, with, as you said, Columbus still trying to figure out themselves a little bit. Minnesota now have a game under their belts of how they're going to look in this new system and the way these two different systems kind of play against each other, that this one could be one of the more high scoring affairs of the weekend.
That's always hard for me to predict just because I'm always, I probably get them wrong a lot, to be honest, but no, you're right. It really depends on where the game goes. Ultimately, I think the potential when you're playing Columbus for games to get stretched and to be a lot of goals is there. There's no doubt. I think in the end, the goal for us is to make sure that it's not open up a way where we're getting chances against us and we can't really recover. And then ultimately, it really is for us to kind of, like I said, make sure that they're honest. If they're throwing numbers forward, that we have an ability to press and get the ball in good spots and go at them right away and get goals. So I guess is that what you're predicting? Big goal game?
I think there's a lot of goals in this one. I mean, it just feels, like I said, with how these two teams play, with what we saw from Minnesota last week, there's certainly got to be confidence in that squad now, knowing that this system, they do know how to play in it well. Even after, I know it is just one game against an Austin side that really struggled at the weekend. This is a different beast in Columbus. The fact that they are defending champs, they look as good as they do. It just feels like there's plenty of goals in this one, but of course I've said that a lot in the past on other podcasts and other broadcasts as well, that it feels like there's goals involved and it never happens. But I just feel like there's now a renewed confidence in this squad after that game in Austin, that they feel like, it seems like there might be an ability to just go up against anyone with how this team played and just kind of duke it out in old school boxing match, just throwing haymakers at each other and see what happens. I know it's early in the season for that, but that's kind of how I feel about this match.
Yeah, no, I definitely think we can get back at their back 3/5. I definitely think there's ability for us to get forward, get numbers in the box, and get chances. So I'm still in my brain trying to think whether there's gonna be a lot of goals though. It's opening game, so we'll see. You're right. I'm gonna stick with your prediction and allow you to have that. And I'll say I'm gonna cheat and just say play it by ear.
All right, I like it. So this isn't just the only tough test coming up. Minnesota have quite a few of them over the next couple weeks. The schedule doesn't get any easier. You've got Orlando, LAFC, and Philadelphia coming up. Two of those on the road in Orlando and Philadelphia. All four of these teams in Columbus, Orlando, LAFC, Philadelphia were in the top four in their respective conferences last year. Obviously, we know Columbus won the title last year. That's a tough stretch, not just for any opening season, but for a new head coach coming in at some point here. What's the best way, I guess, to navigate such a difficult run of teams that you're going to play?
I just like that we have it early in the year and see where we're at. Ultimately, It's really about, the adversity of this early season is, hey, let's go for it. Let's see where we are, our strengths. Let's see our weaknesses, and let's see where the team and the group can build and grow and do better. So to me, that would be ideally that would be the way to go.
Do you think there needs to be a lineup change this weekend for Minnesota against Columbus, or is it more of because of what they showed on Saturday against Austin? Do you think they get another chance at the Apple and see what they can do against a much tougher competition in Columbus?
I mean, we'll see. It's always debatable about the lineups. Obviously there's a tactical element to preparing for a game like Columbus, particularly when it's a team that is so good in certain areas. And then there's obviously a mental element of it's hard. It's going to be really hard for them to change this group that played so well. And the last picture we saw was that grade 11 starting that game for 45 minutes and 45 minutes of soccer. That was some of the better soccer we've had in a year. So to me, we'll see. Ultimately, it's a hard one to say. And that's why coaches get paid. And that's why staffs prepare for the teams and the games, is because those are big decisions. And obviously, too, as you get closer to the week, there's going to be potentially some fitness issues and all that stuff comes into play to see what the 11 is going to be.
So let's jump into Christian Ramirez. We said we'd end the podcast with it since we didn't start. This is a big talking point and a big topic of focus for a lot of fans who have been around the club for years, going beyond the MLS days. Christian Ramirez means a lot to this club, a lot to these fans, and a lot to you because you were his head coach down or in the NASL days. What 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 stood out most about his career for you?
Yeah, I mean, I probably would be like some of the fans, a little emotional when I put on my GM hat and my coaching hat. And that's because he's first and foremost just such an amazing young man who's now, when I had him, was starting to see whether he could have this professional journey and really probably, didn't see it going where it went. And that's probably appropriate because that's the kind of person he was just dedicated and loving to the sport and to his family and to the club in a way that came out in the field. And, I think the kind of behind the scenes thing that I liked about Christian's trajectory was, there was a time when he maybe had some elements of his game that reminded me more of a central midfielder than a forward. And so you had this selflessness where he actually was a great passer and he really wanted to score goals, but he also helped us, I think, at times keeping the ball and reminding forwards that they're not just pure finishers and scorers, but then they're also, positionally or whether how they're kind of setting up their teammates, which Christian did loads of times for Miguel Ibarra as well. He had that element of, I think, actually even kind of quality of being a little bit of a passer as his career went on. And as he started to find his way in the box, in his movement, and find out that he's selfless with his movement, but he's also a great big time finisher. And the guy has done a balance of setting people up or making runs in the box for other people. And then he has had so many great goals throughout his career. I mean, special goals for us, but even outstanding goals. I think about the one at TCF. Was that the Galaxy game? Maybe the one where he just, from the corner of the box over the keeper. Again, this is where my brain goes when you get older. But long story short, the standout for me is obviously the person first and foremost. But then it comes to his service to the club. It was so selfless on so many levels. And then just seeing his career trajectory and thinking about what a great career and what a great person to have such a great career.
Yeah, absolutely. He's one of the more iconic figures in this club's history. Obviously sticking around from NASL to MLS, one of the first signings with the club when the club started their MLS journey and moved on to LAFC, Houston Dynamo, Aberdeen over in Scotland, took a trip across the pond for a little bit. Now back with the Columbus Crew, was a big member of them, or a big part of them winning MLS Cup last year, either starting or off the bench, scoring 8 goals in MLS play last year, 30 appearances, 19 starts, was influential to how they operate. How does he fit into what they do in Columbus? And we mentioned their front three is as threatening as any in the league. What does he do to help that out?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned before, I look at that needing 16 to 18 players to really flow and have that just readiness. And I think Wilfried Nancy, who we haven't mentioned too, is on a great trajectory as a coach. And what an amazing personality that just you can feel the player's personality within Wilfried Nancy. And he's done a great job. I think having something like Christian, in the journey he had last year was when they struggled, he came on the field, made selfless runs. He made sure that they were getting in the box. He was either causing goals or helping other people create havoc to create goals. So to me, I think Wilfried probably looks at that and says, I've got this guy that I can either start or have off the bench when needed, and it looked like last week and he wasn't needed because there was a different type of game and flow. And like I said, I think Columbus dominated more than the scoreline. But he's there for that reason. He was there that last year. So I think he's probably a fan favorite in Columbus as well, based on kind of what he did there and how I think, it's easy to look at Cutro and Rossi and they're important. But these other guys like Christian that can allow a coach to either start him on a day when guys are injured or frankly come off the bench and change a game is something that is really nice for them to have.
All right, so let's put on the coach's hat. We know he's on the opposing team this weekend. What's the best way to shut down Christian Ramirez?
Oh, I mean, I think it's interesting. Obviously, it's probably got a little bit of Boxel in it because Boxel knows him so well and kind of has trained against them and played with him. So certainly Christian's not always the fastest. So in some ways, we got to really make sure we can limit his spaces and make sure that we're not too worried about getting up and not allowing him to turn and get into the box and get forward as much. So again, I think you can probably lean into Boxel's speed over his just a little bit. Again, not trying to be too disrespectful because he's very clever with his movement and sometimes supersedes speed. But ultimately, for me, those are the big things and making sure we're physical with them. And again, I think being aware of his movement, particularly near post runs, he's really selfless and he really does them quite a bit. And he's always hungry to make a run in the box eventually. So he'll hide, and then get in the box. Or again, I think somebody like Cucho is going to be all over the place. Cucho is excited to get wide, run the channel, come back and get the ball and run 30 or 40 yards. So that's a different beast for us to handle. Whereas Christian, again, I think you're going to have to be aware that sometimes he floats in a way, but he's actually not floating. And then he makes some good movement in the box.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be, this one's, as I mentioned already, I'm so interested to see how this one plays out because it just feels like there's goals in hand with this one. It is going to be as energetic of an atmosphere as there can be on Saturday because look, it's going to be 60 degrees. I can't mention that enough with how perfect this weather is. It's not going to be a snow opener. Allianz Field will be packed. The pre-match show starts with Dan Terra and myself on 1500 ESPN at noon. We're doing an hour-long pre-match show leading up to the home opener this weekend. Manny, it's been fun to talk to you this week. Looking forward to the home opener this weekend.
I agree. Like I said, that Tuesday got me so excited for this game because the fans, or some probably played hooky from work. It was sunny. That stadium is obviously it's special to all of us. It's our home. It's our cathedral, and I cannot wait for the crowd to be there for Minnesota United. I can't wait for the players to come out and fight and battle for the club and for the state. And really, like I said, it's been a long couple months where we haven't had MLS games here in Minnesota. So it's just really special to have an opener in your stadium. And again, I've got a lot of salt and pepper in my hair, but it really is fun to have another opening year and get excited for it the same way as you did way back when. So
absolutely. Looking forward to it. Manny, good stuff from you today. Want to thank our producing staff, Grace Dearson, Kyle Hayward, and Evan Entler for putting this all together every week. Loons fans, we will talk to you next week right here on the Matchday preview here on the Sound of the Loons podcast feed.